President Cyril Ramaphosa is meeting with the leaders of political parties represented in Parliament. They're discussing government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and matters related to the national lockdown. This will be the third round of consultative talks the President is holding with leaders of political parties. Yesterday, the President took religious leaders into his confidence regarding the pandemic. These consultative meetings come as the country gears towards moving to level 3 of the national lockdown. It's expected that more restrictions will be lifted from the beginning of June. To date, South Africa has recorded 312 coronavirus-related deaths and 17,200 infections. Well, for more on this story, we cross now to our political reporter, Samkele Maseko, who's standing by for us here in Johannesburg. Thanks very much, Samkele. Tell us more.
Well, Nompumelelo, the President will indeed be holding a meeting with political parties or political party leaders represented in the National Assembly in a virtual meeting to find ways and to consult them on the various measures government can take when it comes to reducing the lockdown from level 4 to level 3. We've heard the Premier of Gauteng, Premier David Makhura, coming out and saying that in June, Gauteng will be moving to level 3 of the lockdown. The President himself, when he was speaking in the Eastern Cape during that visit to that province, he did say that South Africa will definitely be moving towards a level 3 of the lockdown even before the end of May this month. So you've got the Democratic Alliance, which has been threatening to seek legal recourse when it comes to this particular matter of the lockdown, saying that the harsh lockdown that is currently there at level 4 is not assisting the South African economy, which is in the doldrums. Then you've had the economic freedom fighters, which has been very firm and stern that the lockdown should remain firmly in place, and that if the lockdown is lifted, it would result in the work that government has done being null and void, as the infections of the COVID-19 virus would surge in areas of the country. Then you've got some who've criticized the Democratic Alliance and their stance in wanting the Western Cape government to go towards level 3 of the lockdown in that particular province. Their own Premier Alan Winde has been in self-isolation when he came into contact with one of the late ENCA employees who later on succumbed to the COVID-19 pandemic. But the President is holding these talks among threats by the Democratic Alliance to seek legal recourse on this particular matter, when it particularly relates to the issues of the harsh lockdown, which they say is in place, which has negatively affected the economy, and also to try and get clarity on the issue of a state of disaster versus a state of emergency.
Samkele, what do you know about the feeling of the political parties that the President is engaging with, in terms of, do they feel that this is a genuine consultative meeting and that indeed some of their views will be taken on board, or that it's merely the President running through the motions as he goes through his consultative process, so to speak? Well,
Nompumelelo, South Africans have come to know the President of the Republic as a very consultative man, as opposed to a person who is authoritative and who takes decisions upon himself alone, as many South Africans have seen in the past. And they've alluded that the former President used to take decisions alone and never used to consult. Ramaphosa, the President himself, in a one-on-one interview with our political editor, Mzwani Lembete, earlier this year, did point out that he's a very consultative President and that he will consult as widely as possible. But once he makes a decision, he does take a stern and firm decision. But this time around, he enters into a meeting with all these political parties that are represented in Parliament, with their leaders, in a very fragmented and divided society currently when it comes to the issues of this particular pandemic of COVID-19. You've had the Democratic Alliance, which has broken from the unity of parties in Parliament when it comes to the issues of the lockdown. They are now simply wanting the lockdown to be done away with, saying that government is no longer being held accountable to the measures in the form of a state of disaster, and they want to juxtapose that with a state of emergency. Then you've got the economic freedom fighters, led by Julius Malema on the one hand, that is basically very firm and saying that the lockdown should in fact remain at about level 5, and that the mines should not be reopened, and that this basically puts their electorate at harm's way when it comes to the issues of easing down of the lockdown, saying that it's the black majority that will be negatively affected if the lockdown is lifted. Then you've got Reverend Kenneth Misho, on the other hand, the ACDP leader, who has been very vocal that churches should be reopened and that government has been negatively responding towards that the churches, in fact, should not be reopened. So these are the various issues that are plaguing themselves out on these particular matters, particularly when you look at the EFF. It's the issue of the mining sector operating at 50%. You've just had reports coming out of Limpopo from one of the Impala mines that a number of their workforces have tested positive of the particular pandemic, COVID-19. The Minister of Mineral Resources, Gwede Mantashe, had to rush off there to address that particular issue. So these are some of the issues that will be playing themselves out in this virtual meeting that the President will be having with all opposition parties. But what is definitely at the table is the disunity that is currently there amongst all political parties and the variant views that are there, and the Democratic Alliance standing out that the lockdown should be done away with. The ANC saying that the lockdown should be eased, represented by President Cyril Ramaphosa, and the EFF saying that in fact the lockdown should be enforced.
Samkele, thank you very much for that preview. It's going to be a very interesting engagement indeed. My colleague there, Samkele Maseko. We're seeing